Well, good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome to the third part of our four-part webinar series focused on equity-grounded counseling in serving Black students at our campuses. My name is Dr. Wendy Stewart, and I serve as the Dean of Counseling and Student Development at Maricosta College. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm excited to be here today along with other colleagues to provide us with skills and engage in conversation about ways that we can effectively serve our Black students at our campuses. Today's topic is addressing basic needs in educational counseling environments. And it's extremely timely given the fact that we're not only facing a public health crisis with the pandemic, but we also are facing a public health crisis with racism. So today's topic will help us to look at ways that we can help to serve students in whatever environments we're serving them, whether virtually in our offices, face-to-face or at a distance. And I want to start us off by just grounding us in this space and in this work. So you see on the screen an Adinkra symbol, which comes from our ancestors, the ancient people, the ancient Akan people of Ghana. And the Adinkra symbol is called Nkosun Kosun. And there are a lot of different symbols and different meanings around the word unity when we look at African culture. This specific symbol means unity, but it also comes with a sense of interdependence. And you'll see that it looks like links of a chain. And so the concept is that each link of the chain makes us stronger in the work. So Nkosun Kosun talks about collective responsibility, and that really when we engage in this work, we work as a community. So we invite you into the space in that spirit that we're working together. And even though this is a webinar and there'll be folks who are going to be disseminating information to you virtually, we want you to engage, use the chat to highlight if you hear something that really stood out to you. Talk to other colleagues who are in the room. And there are those of us who, in addition to our dynamic speakers, who are also working behind the scenes to respond via chat on YouTube and Zoom. These sessions are recorded, and so an email will go out with the recording for the session afterwards. So I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Adrian Askernies, also out of Maricosta College, and he will be followed by Luis Chavez, who's the Senior Director for the Career Ladders Project.
Thank you, Dr. Stewart, and good morning to you all. As part of this process, I wanted to welcome you all to our third webinar. And before we get started, since we are celebrating Black History Month, I wanted to take the opportunity to do two things. One, I know we have our elder, Don Love, and I know he's in the background, so I'm going to ask for his permission if I may begin the process to just connect with our community.
Proceed, my brother.
Thank you, Don. And then also, we wanted to take this opportunity to give a moment of silence for, the people that we lost this month, and then also honor our ancestors as well. So for those that are listening in and on the chat too, just wanted you to take the opportunity and think of that elder that has supported you throughout your life and beyond. So we just wanted to take time to honor these folks. So we'll just give a little bit of time for that. And since this webinar is, we're taking it from a community approach, we do have some questions at the end. We're going to be taking it to the porch. Since we won't have time to take it to the porch. Normally we would have some questions that we would do at the end of the webinar. We do have a list of questions that we're going to send out to you. So we want to make this as interactive as possible so that you can take this back to your community and share this, with coworkers, family members, and so forth. So we want to definitely take the time again and say thank you very much, and we look forward to connecting with you. And I'll pass it over to Luis.
Good morning. I'm trying to fix my video here. There we go. Good morning. We hope you are all keeping safe and doing well. I wanted to also add, just to take a moment here to acknowledge the struggle, situation, and unfortunate events that have occurred in Texas. They are facing some really deep challenges, and we're hoping and thinking about them as rescue and support comes to those who need it. So adding that to our thoughts this morning. Thank you, Dr. Stewart. Thank you, Dr. Askarniz, for the introduction and for this opportunity to work with you all. On behalf of the Career Ladders Project and the California Counseling Network, we are proud to have the opportunity to support these webinar, the series supporting counseling Black students because of all the work that has been now before us because of the pandemics, as you mentioned, Dr. Stewart. I'm especially happy to support these webinar because it aligns so well with the California Counseling Network core value of practitioner to practitioner learning and in exchange. There is no replacement for this kind of opportunity to learn from each other, from colleagues doing the work. And in this moment of unprecedented change, I know we hear that over and over again, the challenges that are faced and the disruption that we're going through, we must push ourselves. As our colleague in a prior webinar in this series said, we must become scholars of our profession and of our practice. Find ways to elevate our understanding of the work to collectively achieve effective counseling for Black students. The focus for today, of course, is on basic skills. And it's such an important topic given all the issues that we're going through. And as counselors, we know that Maslow's hierarchy of needs is an important element in the counseling process. And as a result of the multiple pandemics, I'm sure we're all reading the reports and news about how the negative effects of these pandemics are affecting students. Those of you who are working directly with students see that devastating effect of stress levels, the compounding issues, especially for Black students who are managing multiple issues on top of all of these realities, things like double consciousness, for example. This heightens the importance of this work that we must do to unpack and examine these needs that students have. So we're hoping that you will join us today in digging in and learning a lot more because these are complex in some ways, but also can be approached by evidence, information, and working with each other to support the needs of students. And because basic needs can be a great impediment for equitable student success, counselors can and do play a role in the critical role of ensuring learning. This webinar is going to be presented to you by a wonderful group or two wonderful presenters who have taken great care in building the content for you. And we know that you will gain much from it. So let's dig in with them. Please engage with us and with them. Jot down your ideas for follow-up. There will be, I'm sure, a number of things that you'll want to check into and hopefully keep engaged with us. So let's begin now. Thank you.
Okay, it's time for us to get into it. So be prepared. As I am thrilled to introduce to you our key speakers for today's topic. As Luis said, we're called to be scholars. These two individuals are both scholars, but they're also practitioners. So they are on the ground working with students and will bring to you that flavor in their presentation today. Devin Boone is a licensed clinical social worker. He is also the manager for the Campus Assessment, Resources and Education Department, the CARE Department at MiraCosta College, focusing on providing services to students who may be facing challenges around basic needs. And he is joined by Dawn Love, a counselor coordinator for the Umoja program and Summer Bridge program at MiraCosta College, serving Black and African American students. Dawn also has previously worked with the statewide Umoja program, and he serves as one of the counseling leads at MiraCosta College in our Guided Pathways efforts. So I turn it over to Devin and Dawn.
Thank you, Dr. Wendy Stewart. Glad to be here with you all today. Good morning. I want to start us off today by talking about what's really important, and that is basic needs. So before we kind of jump into what basic needs are, I wanted to share little bit about my department, as we're solely committed to addressing the basic need concerns of our students through a holistic approach. And how we do so is through a case management model of linking students to on and off campus resources that are going to help meet their short-term and long-term needs with the goal of improving the outcomes of their academic and personal success. So some of the direct services that we provide include our campus food pantry and farmers market. Our pantry is currently suspended until the pandemic is over, but we were able to successfully transition our farmers market through a drive-through model that operates twice a month for students to access free groceries. We provide emergency grants of up to $500 for students to use as they see fit. And when we developed this form, it was important that we use a trauma-informed approach to ensuring that it was low barrier for students to access these funds and to apply, and that students had the autonomy to choose how they spent their money. We provide assistance with CalFresh applications. We also recognize this semester that students' needs go far beyond what $500 could cover. And as housing insecurity continued to be a prevalent concern, we reserved some funds and set that aside so that students could apply and receive up to $1,000 to cover toward their rent or mortgage related fees. And then as we're seeing the gap between students that have access to adequate technology as we transition to online learning, we partner with our MiraCosta Library to create a seamless process and a referral form for students to apply and receive technology such as laptops, mobile hotspots that they could borrow for the semester. So with that, I want to talk about what basic needs is, because you might be asking this question. And so basic needs was first, this term was first introduced by the International Labor Organization's World Employment Conference in 1976, but has since become a legal mandate in the State versus Bunting case. So really what came about in that case is that basic needs refers to anything that's necessary to sustain life. So it's really a minimum requirement that we should have access to water, food, and shelter. But as we're focusing in on our students, I want to hear from you all that are participating today. We're going to drop a Mentimeter link in the chat, and I want you to add in there, what are some of the basic need concerns that you have heard or seen from your students on your campus? So kind of give you a few seconds to drop those responses in, and I'll kind of read out what we're seeing. I see some in the chat. We definitely are seeing food as a basic need concern, transportation, internet, housing, power, childcare. Yes, and these are all definitely prevalent basic need concerns that are coming up. And so in addition to those basic need concerns, what we're also seeing is finances. Students have unexpected financial concerns that are coming up. Mental health continues to be a basic need concern, especially as the pandemic is exacerbating that. We have students that are homeless and struggling with housing insecurity. And we have students that also are facing legal issues and need that support of legal aid. And so really, basic needs can be anything that essentially impedes, our students' academic and personal success. And with that, as we're defining some of the more, prevalent basic need concerns, that really includes our food and housing, which it's important to define these because as we look at like housing insecurity, it falls on a spectrum from what we're seeing with our students. So when you see our students that are experiencing homelessness or housing insecurity, we have students who are sheltered, which means they might be living in an emergency shelter, transitional housing. Then we have students who meet HUD's definition of literal homelessness. So this means that they're living in a place that's not meant for human habitation. So we have students that we know are sleeping in their cars, students who are literally sleeping on the sidewalk. Maybe they have a tent, maybe they have a sleeping bag, maybe they have nothing at all, but they're still showing up for school and trying to be present. Students who are displaced. And what that looks like is a student who's couch surfing, whether they're living with a family displacement is really driven by economic pressure and is unstable because at any moment that student could be asked to leave that living situation and not have another option of where they could go. We also have students who are doubled up, meaning that they're living with two or more related or unrelated families. And it's important to note that for some families, this might be a cultural norm and they may not deem their situation as housing insecure. And when it comes to food insecurity, that definition essentially means that someone is considered food insecure if they are without reliable access to food that is affordable, nutritious, culturally appropriate, and sufficient in quality. And so you heard from Luis talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And it's important to note this because for our students at MiraCosta, we want them to know that we care. And so the support beam that you're seeing in front of you at the top of the pyramid that represents our culture of care and support is to be uplifted by our instruction and student services division. And that's to ensure that students feel that they matter and they belong at MiraCosta College, that we're identifying students who are struggling personally and academically at the earliest point possible. And by doing so, we're connecting those students to on and off campus resources to support their needs. And so the triangle that you're seeing in front of you represents Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which proposes that in order for an individual to reach their fullest potential or self-actualization, which is at the top of the pyramid, we have to address their basic needs and psychological needs first. And if you were in our last webinar series and you had the honor of hearing from our student Smash, he talked about gaining a sense of belonging at MiraCosta because of the relationships he built with counselors, administrators, and the Moja community. And it's because of those relationships that they directly reinforce the self-esteem that Smash needed to feel like he could accomplish his academic and personal goals. So I'm proposing this because before you jump right into maybe trying to create an ed plan with your student, I want you to scale back and think about how you can work alongside of your student to meet their basic needs and establishing a sense of belonging and connection to the campus so that you could complete that ed plan, so that that student can reach graduation and degree attainment. And so let's talk a little bit about the data that we're seeing in basic needs. So California statewide data that was conducted by Dr. Sarah Goldberg-Rabb and the Hope Center for College was conducted back in 2016 and 2018. So this is the hashtag Real College Survey, which surveyed over 40,000 California community college students from over 57 community colleges across the California state. And what they found was that 50% of those participants reported experiencing food insecurity, while 60% reported experiencing housing insecurity, and 19% reported experiencing homelessness. So if we're thinking about those definitions again, it's the students who are either sheltered or unsheltered. And then what they found amongst that data was that there was many disparities among the Black and African American students, as well as our students that identify as LGBTQIA. And then I want us to drill down a little bit more about our basic needs data that we're seeing at the MiraCosta College. And this data is representative of our student body. We collect data on basic need concerns through our pre-registration survey, which is part of student enrollment. And the survey covered questions that were related to concerns about food, housing, and transportation. And I want to first start off by noting that we believe these numbers are way higher than what's actually being reported, because we recognize that one, there is stigma in self-reporting, especially for our Black male students who may have difficulty engaging in help-seeking behaviors or reporting. We also recognize that the answers automatically defaulted to no. So, some students may have skipped over these questions and not answered them because it, is a lengthy survey to complete. And then the pre-registration survey is only required for enrollment of our credit students. So it is not inclusive of our non-credit and adult high school education students. So we are missing data from those students as well. But from what we found when the survey was conducted in fall of 2020, over 15,000 students completed the survey, and over 2,500 of those students reported experiencing some form of a basic need concern. So 8.3% of students reported being food insecure within the last 30 days of completing the survey. 12.5% reported experiencing housing insecurity over the last 6 months of completing the survey. And then 7% reported experiencing some form of transportation barriers at the time that they were completing the survey. We also found disproportionate impact amongst our Black and African American students, as well as our students between the ages of 25 and 49, and our LGBTQIA students, specifically our queer, non-binary, bisexual, pansexual, and students that identify with multiple genders. And it's important to note that for our Black students across all 3 domains that we were surveying with food, housing, and transportation, our Black and African American students were struggling the most. So what's important to me and what's important to my department is that we're using this data to target our outreach to those students and ensure that our Black students are first in line to access our resources and our services, and making sure that they know that we are available to support them. So as we transition, if you were able to attend the Black Minds Matter series, I found this quote to be very relevant to today's work and how we're framing how our Black students are navigating through their academic experience. And while I won't read the quote, it's in front of you today, Dr. Luke Woods proposed this quote. And from what I found from it was that our Black students, when it comes to their education, they feel undervalued, especially our Black men and our Black boys, and they're assumed to be academically inferior. They're also criminalized in the classrooms and often at times assumed to be up to no good or be deviant. And so I want you to think about that as our Black students are what they're enduring as they're navigating their educational and environmental systems. So this leads me to a trauma-informed care approach. So I'm wanting you and I'm asking you to shift your lens today. So if you're not familiar with trauma-informed care, this is an approach that can be applied to your everyday life and your interactions with others, especially our students. This is an approach that assumes that everyone has experienced some form of trauma in their life. It recognizes that trauma is complex and can be experienced on a cultural and racial level. And for our Black students, the trauma they experience can be generational due to the long-lasting effects of the chronic trauma that the generations have experienced before them. In our first webinar series, we talked about using empathy as a tool for equity. Well, this approach allows you to lead with empathy by shifting the way you're thinking about your students. So it's no longer what's wrong with you when you're looking at what's going on with the student, but what has happened to you. It's a process of allowing yourself to begin to understand the impacts and the effects that trauma and other basic need concerns have on the way our students view themselves, the world, and others. This is an approach that emphasizes that we want to avoid re-traumatization through upholding principles and the pillars of trauma-informed care, which I'll get to in the next slide. But it's also a holistic approach that considers a person and their environment. So as we're talking about person and environment, this is a theory that comes from Bronfenbrenner's ecological theory, and it proposes the way in which we try to understand our students can largely be understood by looking at their environment, starting from a microsystem all the way up to the macro system. And so as you're seeing what these different environments and systems are, I'd like to point out for our Black students that during this or riots that you happen to see on the Capitol, our exosystem, our macro system, we're reinforcing the overarching beliefs and values that are held about Black people and what we already knew to be true regarding the disparities in how we're treated versus our non-Black counterparts. So as we're examining the multi-level environmental system of our Black students and as they're navigating through them, I want you to think about how these systems contribute to the trauma that they're experiencing and what they're bringing with them into their educational environment. So the trauma-informed care principles, these are really important. These are pillars that you're going to take with you today, and I want you to hold tight to them. So with trauma-informed care, we want to ensure that we establish safety, and this means both physical and emotional safety. We want to make sure that we are providing choice and that our students know that they have some control over the choices that can be made, and that we're being clear and providing appropriate messaging about their rights and responsibilities. It's also important that there's collaboration. So we want shared power in making decisions with our students, especially when it comes to planning and evaluating the services that they're receiving. It's important that trust is built in, and that's done so by being consistent and maintaining and making sure that you establish an interpersonal and professional boundary with the students that you serve. And lastly, empowerment. So we want to prioritize empowerment and skill building. We want our students to walk into, our meeting or leaving our meeting feeling like they've been validated and affirmed during each contact that they make with us. And so you might be asking, how do I put these principles, into practice? How do I provide safety and build trust? Well, you do so by providing, unconditional positive regard. And so what this means is that you're giving a basic acceptance and support of the person and the student, regardless of what they may say or they may do. In the therapeutic world, we talk about holding space. And what that means is really putting my needs and my opinions aside while I'm meeting with that student to just let them be who they are. And that you're listening to understand and not always respond. I had a hard time at one point trying to face when there was silence, but you have to provide that space so that you're not taking it up for students. You want to meet the student where they're at. And in our last webinar series, you heard from some of our counselors talk about how they took a non-traditional approach to meeting students outside of the classroom. And if you haven't considered already, I want you to think about this, it's a lot easier for our students to open up to you as you're walking alongside of them versus how intimidating it can be to sit face to face with a counselor or somebody that you don't quite know just yet. You also want to be clear about your expectations from the beginning. So for some of our students who have had their safety and trust violated, they're stepping into our offices very cautious of us. So when you can, I want you to have a dialogue with the students about what they can expect from you. And by doing so, this equals predictability. So therefore, it can establish some safety and some trust. And lastly, I want you to be clear about your role and your scope of competence. It's better to be clear about what you can and cannot do for them than to have this boundary be mistaken or blurred down the line in your relationship with the student. And in our last webinar series, I know we had a participant ask if they would be overreaching by exploring a student's needs outside of their academics. And, while it might not be in your scope of practice or competence to be a therapist or, be in my role, you can still elicit what their needs are while setting a boundary by letting the student know that you'd like to connect them with the appropriate department that can further provide, support and resources in this area. And as we're moving along to choice, you might be asking, in what ways can you provide choice? Some of you may be held up by bureaucratic tape and, processes, but when possible, let the student prioritize their goals while they're meeting with you. The student is really the expert in their own lives. So this means that we want to allow room for self-determination when making choices about what resources or services that they'd like to pursue or that they feel will best meet their needs. You want to think through what are a student's options to switch supports if you're not the right fit, and how is this being communicated? So you have to be aware that there could be things about your characteristics that may trigger, past emotions or experiences in the student or even you. And in the therapeutic world, we call this process transference and countertransference. So it's really being aware that this might come up for the student or yourself. You also want to think about, how does the student prefer to communicate with you? And what steps are you prepared to take if this doesn't align with your communication style? So during this pandemic, we've had to think outside of the box in, the non-traditional ways in which we're meeting students and communicating with them to reach them. You also want to think about, how does the student prefer to be addressed? Definitely don't make the assumption that the name that you're seeing in their file is the name that they'd like to be called. And the same goes with their pronouns. And last, what are the students' options if they would like to terminate services? So are we being clear from the beginning about their choice to engage in services or not? And these are all considerations and for how we can empower our students to have a choice in the services that they're receiving. When it comes to collaboration, you want to discuss expectations you have about collaboration from the beginning. You want to be clear about if you really want the student to play an active role in their educational mapping or educational planning. You want to ask the student about what is their priority focus area. And how you do so is by starting each meeting or session with, how can I best support you right now? Where would you like to start? Again, that's collaboration. That's giving them the choice to guide where they want to go today. Again, you want to be cautious about not taking up too much space with your own questions, but allowing some space for the student to open up and talk with you. And then again, just continuously assessing what's going to be effective and what's not in your process of working with the student. And lastly, as we're empowering and thinking about empowering our students, I really want you to listen out for the students' strengths and support networks and reflect that back to them, and really highlight the resilience and small steps toward their goals. Sometimes our students really have a hard time connecting the dots of how they can leverage those strengths or natural supports in their lives. So we want to be listening out for those as they're coming to us and really reflect and highlight that back to them. So I thank you all for this time of covering, this approach. I do want to pass it along to my colleague, Don Love, to talk a little bit more about how basic needs is being incorporated into an educational and counseling environment.
Thank you, Devin. So one aspect of the trauma-informed care approach that Devin mentioned is that trauma can be experienced on multiple levels. Race is one of those levels. Our Black students are dealing with the effects of systemic racism, and as we continue to see during COVID and throughout this past year, the political and social unrest, the weight of systemic oppression is magnified immensely. A question we as counselors must ask ourselves is, what lens do you see Black students through? Using a racial equity lens in our counseling practice is the beginning of learning how to better serve Black students on our campuses. I love the framework developed by Nikita Wilborn. This is a gentleman that I've spoken with and looking to bring to our campus to work specifically with our Moja team in improving what we do and working with students. He's an equity trainer and an artist and an organizational consultant. He's developed a racial equity lens framework that comprises 6 areas of emphasis. Centering race, which focuses on the critical need to address race intentionally and explicitly. Ensuring access, inclusion, and full participation in programs, the resources we provide, and educational opportunities. Understanding that whiteness is what whiteness is and how it continues to operate to support systems of racial inequity. Building bridges, how we work with others. It requires coalition building and extending our networks. And these are some of the necessary skills to do this: are empathy, cooperation, trust, being an effective communicator. Devin kind of talked about this earlier as well. Shifting of power, addressing the power dynamics that hinder equity work. It calls on those with power to engage in a process of sharing and shifting power to ensure agency among all stakeholders. And number 6, centering in relationships, about creating and sustaining authentic and informal relationships across difference. When you consider all the various traumas experienced by Black students, it becomes critical that these efforts are approached with a racial equity lens, recognizing that Black students are facing disproportionate stress and trauma right now. So what role do our institutions play in creating a trauma-informed framework throughout the campus community? As an institution, our goal is to ensure that all students feel safe, welcomed, and supported. To that end, the institution must ensure the physical safety, create a safe environment, making sure that the campus has adequate lighting for our students who are taking night classes, and welcoming signage. I've had the opportunity to walk onto a couple of campuses early in the spring of last year, and it was amazing to see some of these, not only just the signage, but the images that they had as you walk their campus. And really got a sense of who they are and that they were centering students. Improving emotional and relational safety, developing and implementing peer-to-peer support and networking programs, providing easier and simpler access to mental health services. Devin talked about what he does with the care team. We have a very simple process for us to refer students to health services and our care team. Improving staff and faculty awareness and understanding of trauma. Creating opportunities for students, faculty, and staff to build relationships, promote campus mental health and wellness. And finally, provide regular training for faculty and staff in trauma-informed practices. These are always well attended on our campus. We offer this annually, and it's great to see our students getting some of this training as well. Colleges are systems, and creating a trauma-informed climate is everybody's business. During our last webinar, the words institutional transformation was used. How do we transform our institutions so that it meets the needs of our Black students? It requires the entire campus community, faculty members, staff members, counselors, all constituency groups on campus and our community partners to deepen our shared understanding of the impact of trauma on learning, and that we agree to a holistic campus-wide approach to meet the needs of our students. All staff members must work together with a sense of shared responsibility and a sense of urgency for the physical, social, and emotional safety of our students. And finally, creating a learning environment that is in step with the educational needs of students who may be living with a trauma narrative. In this era of guided pathways, we must be cognizant of the fact that if we are not taking a trauma-informed approach, meeting our students where they are, then we'll have a difficult time providing effective counseling and other services in meeting the basic needs of our students. Dr. Aspinese mentioned in webinar number 2 that we can't just mouth the words, meet them where they are. It can't just be a talking point. What do the day-to-day lives of our students look like? How can we assess those needs in our counseling appointments? Before we get to a comprehensive education plan, we must ensure we properly assess where the student is and what their needs are. We need to build rapport. I've had some of the most robust and informative conversations with students outside of my office, just walking to the cafeteria or social justice and equity center or honors lounge. It allows me to see students in a different context. It allows me to connect with them on a different way. And often, as I watch students walk past the window in my office, if I'm in between appointments, I literally will walk out the door, catch that student, take a couple of minutes just to connect with them, do a quick check-in. How often many of us feel the pressure to complete a comprehensive education plan. We know how important the plan is to student success. However, if we don't know who that student is, and they don't feel comfortable sharing key pieces of who they are and what they're experiencing, we're going to fall short of meeting their needs. Community building and rapport doesn't just happen when we focus on the education plan from the jump. Focus on the student. Let the student tell us who they are and what they need. The triage plus stabilization equals trust, persistence, and retention. I won't spend a lot of time reading this slide because Devin covered the various basic needs very thoroughly. However, I do want to highlight some things in my own program as an Emoja practitioner. I know my students. I listen to them. I respond to their needs based off of what I'm hearing. I called one of my students last week, just as a check-in. In between appointments, I go through my Rolodex on my phone and I just call students random, start from A to Z. And I found out she was in the process of losing her housing because she was behind in rent. She had lost her job due to COVID. It took a few months to secure another full-time job. But now, as she's starting to collect a paycheck and trying to climb out of that financial hole, she's given an eviction notice. It was because of the emergency rental assistance fund that I was able to submit on her behalf and was approved very quickly. She was able to maintain her apartment and reduce an incredible amount of stress. Another student said that the spring semester is off to a great start, but he's concerned because his laptop has been performing poorly, and he was worried that he was going to start to fall behind and have a repeat of his fall semester, which didn't go as well as he had hoped. He didn't get connected early enough, didn't look for resources, and we didn't catch him by reaching out soon enough. And so fall was not a great semester for him. But I was able to help him submit a technology request for a loaner laptop. And it was amazing to see the amount of anxiety that was reduced in him. His body language changed, his voice changed. He was stunned to find out that we actually offered this type of resource for him. And then after we fill out the simple form, I said, hey, let's submit this emergency grant request and see if we can get you some money as well. And he shared with me, wow, I just lost my job last week. So neither student was aware of the resources because they're busy trying to stay ahead of or fight off the various issues that are impacting their lives. They're trying to keep a lot of balls in the air. Lastly, another student is a single mom, 2 kids. She's back in school after being on again and off again for the past 9 to 10 years. She calls, texts, emails me at least twice a week And when she calls, I always hear her kids in the background wanting her attention without exception. She's in my class. Her kids are on the Zoom call with us. She's determined to complete her degree, raise her kids, and change all of their lives through education. What a challenge she's undertaken. Imagine the stress and anxiety that come with being a mom trying to balance family, school, and work. How do we as counselors, as faculty and staff, make sure that we are meeting her needs? Be intrusive. As counselors, intrusive counselors try to anticipate and look for issues, concerns, roadblocks, anything that has in the past or could potentially in the future get in the way of a student interacting in their courses or counseling appointment in a meaningful way. The goal is to help the student feel cared for by the institution as a whole. In Umoja, we have the practice everybody's business. The last student I mentioned in the previous slide, she told me a few weeks ago that she has never experienced so much connection from different folks representing different areas of our college. Now, she came from a campus that had an Umoja program. She said, in my Umoja program, I felt very affirmed. But it was all of the folks that she's been introduced to since she's been at Miracosta. She said every single person representing different departments has made her feel like they are part of her success. It's everybody's business. Using a holistic approach, mind, body, and spirit. This is when we touch the spirit of our students. The Umoja practice ethic of love. Having a simple intake form that's not too long, not too intrusive, because I don't want them filling out a form. I want to actually have a conversation with the student. And so we want to gather enough information to start the dialogue, but I want to use that point to have what Dr. Ashkeny said last week. Have a conversation with our students, be present, and change the emphasis from developing the education plan first to developing a relationship first. Intrusive counseling requires that we don't wait for our students to reach out to us. We need to have a contact plan in place to reach out to our students first. Be proactive. I'm not a social media person, but because my students are on social media, I'm on social media. And so I'm using every method that I can to make sure that I have an opportunity to connect with them. Don't allow access to resources to be a roadblock. When we went remote last spring, as counselors, those of us who've never counseled online, as faculty members, we've never taught online, a lot of panic. But think what our students were going through. And they were trying to figure out how to access resources, how to connect with financial aid, with admissions, health services. Don't just use one method to connect with students. It's not enough to send an email or a text. Have that contact plan to reach out continuously. At another college I worked at, I made weekly calls to our Umoja students and mostly left messages and followed up with emails. At the end of the semester at our Black graduation, I met two of the students who had never returned a phone call. And they both said, you know, I was going through a lot this semester and I was just going to drop out. But every time I came home during the week, I'd have a voice message from you. And I just meant to call you and schedule that appointment, never got there, but it got me to the end of the semester. So we sometimes don't know the extent to which a phone call and reaching out to a student actually means to them. Relationship building. It starts during the first contact. Solve a problem. Many times they don't even know they had. I met with a student last week, the same student with the laptop. And I noticed that he registered for spring classes in late December. And the only reason was because he did not complete the online orientation. So I showed him how by completing that, he's going to have an earlier enrollment date for summer and for fall coming up. And even that brought joy to him because he was always worried about am I going to get the classes if I have to register late all the time? And then lastly, when we went remote, we were working with, had a couple of meetings with Dr. Frank Harris of SDSU, and he helped us craft our plan to transition our summer programs from on ground to online. We talked about the importance of not falling into the digital abyss. And during COVID, that's very easy to do. Hearing your voice over the phone may have a bigger impact than we realize. As I mentioned with the student I talked to, calling all semester long. And here I just want to highlight a few resources that we have for our students. We started a Black student support group during the summer that continues on fall and spring. We want to provide a space for our Black students to talk it out weekly. We have Emoja Village Hours. I had a number of students, as I'm calling my students weekly, a lot of them just were having a hard time, especially early on, trying to figure out, how do I schedule an appointment? Mr. Love, you told me to go talk to the transfer center as well. I can't get a hold of them. So we started Village Hours. Every Monday and Wednesday from 1 to 3, myself or someone on our team is in the village space, and students know that they can just log in and we will help them navigate the challenges of connecting with whatever resources they need. Community building opportunities with our Black Alliance First Friday meetings, a group comprised of faculty, staff, and community members and students. We have a weekly Emoja Porch Talks. Again, community conversations built. We have a basic students resource guide that we give to our new students so they actually can see images of Black faculty, staff, administrators, and their roles. And I want to highlight one of the things that we've done at our campus as an Emoja program. And we started this, I think, about eight or 9 years ago. We started a fundraiser because one of those basic needs that I was running into constantly was that our students needed finances, and it didn't have the resources to support them at that time. So we decided, hey, let's do a fundraiser, and we'll just have a foundation account, and we'll be able to support students with what we can raise annually from this fund. And so that's been an ongoing event for us. Right now, we are having a month of giving. We normally have an event called Soul Fusion, full of music and comedy. It's an amazing event that's put on by our students. This year, we're going to be virtual. And so I'd love to give all of you that opportunity to give to our students if you so desire. And I just dropped a link to our giving page in the chat. And with that, I'd like to transition to our Student Voices segment.
And Don, I just wanted to give you a heads up, your camera's off, and I want our participants today to see the face behind all the great work that you've been able to do at MiraCosta College. So thank you.
Thank you, Devin. I appreciate that. As with each webinar, it's important to put into practice what we've been talking about. And so we'll transition to listening to our two amazing student speakers from MiraCosta College, Patricia Crowley and Christopher Burrows. Patricia, why don't you lead us off by, I'm going to use Adrian's language from last week. Tell us who you are. Share your name, your major, and any affiliation to clubs or programs on campus.
Unmute myself. Sorry about that. I forgot to unmute. My name is Patricia Crowley, and I'm a member of the Emoja family. I'm also in the Emoja Community Club. I volunteer at Tri-City Hospital off campus, and I am a returning student. I originally came to MiraCosta in 1986 and dropped out after one semester, withdrew. I didn't have the support that I needed. I couldn't figure out how to navigate from high school to college. And I returned in 2019 after retiring as a bus driver for 27 years. And I'm due to graduate at the end of this semester with my AA as a medical office professional. And I will be transferring to Mesa College to enter their bachelor's program for health information management.
How about you, Chris?
Since I can't start my video.
There you go.
There it is.
Yeah.
Hey, so my name is Christopher Burrows. My major is environmental sustainability. I've been at MiraCosta for 3 years, beginning in August of 2018. In the fall of this year, I'll be transferring to San Diego State University for the sustainability program. I am a formerly incarcerated student. I did 14 years in California State Prison before coming to MiraCosta, which was just kind of like my release date was June 18th of 2018, and I was attending school at MiraCosta August 17th of 2018. So it was a pretty quick transition. At MiraCosta, I'm a member of the Horticulture Club. I'm also a member of the EOPS program, the Honors Program. I'm a member of Umoja. I am the Vice President of Scholarship for Phi Theta Kappa. I am also the Treasurer of the Black Student Union.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris, for briefly sharing your story. While I have you here, I wanted to ask you if you could briefly share with us your understanding of the counseling support that you've experienced during this COVID-19 pandemic. So that counseling support could either be general academic counseling, emoji counseling, mental health counseling. Could you share with us what your experience has been?
Is that me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I wrote some answers down just so I could remember some things. So I wrote down that I have received great counseling support from MiraCosta since day one. The first day that I came to register at MiraCosta, I talked to an EOPS counselor, and he sat with me for about 2 hours and just outlined what I needed to do to be successful. Being a reentry and formerly incarcerated student has definitely had its challenges, just getting up to speed with everything that takes place in college. The personal relationships that I have with my counselors have been really big for me. I've got a great relationship with Don Love, my Umoja counselor, and also with Larry Burns, my EOPS counselor. Both of them have made themselves available to me by cell phone, which is the easiest way for me to communicate. I'm just not an email person. I feel like they listen to me and they care about what's going on with me. I knew coming out of prison that I would need to find men that would be able to mentor me to help me be successful. I talk to them when I don't understand things, and they always take the time to point me in the right direction. I call my Umoja counselor when I'm stressed out and feeling overwhelmed, like I was last semester. Sharing resources, they share resources with me, direct me to the right people, introduce me to new things, and share their experience with me that helped me make decisions that have been fruitful. These personal connections are a big part of why I've been successful in school. When my best friend and life partner passed away on October 2nd of last year during the fall semester, Don was one of the first people that I called, and he spoke to me on a personal level. He directed me to healthcare services, which I did call. But at that point, I didn't really follow up with him because at that point, I just wasn't in a place to be talking to a lot of people. But, just listening to Don a few minutes ago, he mentioned something. He said, I know my students, I listen to my students, and I respond to their needs. And that's exactly what Don does. I don't know that I've ever met anybody as selfless as him and as encouraging. And so that's been a big help for me while I've been at school, just having that relationship and mentorship that I know that I can count on. Thank you.
Yeah. You're definitely the expert of your own life, and I'm glad that you found Don on this campus. Don, I think you have the next question. I'm gonna pass it to you.
Yes. What resources have you been able to take advantage of, whether it be on or off campus? And how has this impacted your academic or personal success?
So you know me, Don. I take advantage of all the resources I can, but you know, Narcotics Anonymous has been one of the big. Going to prison, I had a substance abuse background, so I knew that I needed to learn how to live a clean life. And as soon as I got out, I became involved in Narcotics Anonymous, and that has probably been the quintessential resource for me in learning how to live a responsible life. In school, and also I continue to work with formerly incarcerated individuals, and that helps to keep me grounded and gives me a sense of purpose, helping others that have been in my shoes. Going to conferences like the Amend Conference, which I was able to attend through Emoja, has given me a lot of inspiration. Just seeing all those Black men PhDs at the pinnacle of education has given me a lot of inspiration. EOPS and Umoja have really been big for me, as far as like book vouchers and gas cards and emergency grants, school supplies, scholarship information, and then just the community of having other people that I can look to and encourage, and that encourage me. The CARE emergency grant program has been big. It's helped me a lot financially. It's alleviated a lot of the financial stress. As a 46-year-old man going back to school and having been incarcerated for 14 years, like I don't have, I can't just go to school and not work. I work full time, sometimes 60 hours a week so that I can pay bills. And so getting that financial stress lifted a little bit is really big. After doing a student work study in the horticulture department, I got a job working in my career path. And I got that through the Career Center on campus. So I've utilized that resource, I think, really well, and that's worked for me. I always make connections with my presenters that come into class. I live now in the house, the rental home of the first presenter that I had in my class back in 2018. And he dropped the rent for me because he knew I couldn't afford it. I've received food from the farmers market, scholarships from industry organizations. I use the student discounts every time I can, like collegebuys.org, and anything that, any time that I need to purchase something for my needs, I always look and see if they have a student discount, so that's another resource that I've used.
And Patricia, I think we skipped over you with question number 2. So I want to go back and give you a chance to answer that. Give us a brief understanding of the counseling support you've experienced, especially during this COVID period.
Okay. For me, the counseling support that I've received has been primarily through the Emoja program. I call it my Emoja family because they're like the foundation that I jump off of to do just about anything. For school, they have helped me to get books when I needed books. Village Hours has been really big during the pandemic, as well as our porch talks, because I know that every Friday there's going to be a porch talk, and it helps to alleviate some of the loneliness that I have with this pandemic. We've been pretty isolated in my house. My husband has a terminal illness, and that's part of why I'm back in school too, is I have a time frame to kind of come up with another career. And so it's been pretty lonely and pretty stressful being at home. So the Village Hours and the Porch Talk, and I have utilized the Black Student Support Group. And for me, that's been a big game changer, especially during this pandemic. It's given me a safe space where I can decompress, I can process kind of everything that's going on, whether it's stress from being at home, whether it's Black Lives Matter, dealing with the death of George Floyd, and all of those feelings that came up that I didn't know what to do with. And it allowed me to stay in school. I hit a wall last semester and thought I would not complete some of my classes, which isn't like me. And I think that that's been one of the biggest parts for me, is the mental health services through the Black student support, and knowing that Umoja's invested in me. Dr. Stewart, Don, they believe in me when I didn't believe in myself. And I'm finally starting to realize that I do belong in this space. So.
You do.
Absolutely.
And so, Patricia, while we have you here, if we're thinking about, I want to pose this question. If you're thinking about, other essential needs that you have, what are some of your most important needs that aren't being met? And how could the college help you meet these needs so that you can better focus on your education?
Well, that's a really hard question to answer because I feel like Umoja provides just about everything that I've needed.
Mm-hmm.
One of the areas that I had a big issue with when returning to school was financial aid. Because I had dropped classes in 86, I was put on probation, and they said they were going to not afford me with financial aid. And I was going to just say, okay, this is just not for me. But Don, he told me, nope, there's a way that we can get this figured out. So for me, making that leap to getting help via financial aid is a big barrier that some people can have, especially when you're a returning student.
Mm-hmm.
And then learning how to take care of myself. I do wish that we had a little bit more on self-care. I mentioned that we get a newsletter every week, and just having like a little self-care tip in our newsletter would be really helpful, because a lot of times you're in the midst of things and you forget you have tools to handle the stress, you have tools to handle these things, but it's just getting that little reminder, I think, would be really helpful.
Yes, that's definitely right, Patricia. And I can tell that, with you being a caretaker, sometimes when we're in that role, we forget to take care of ourselves. And so I like your innovative thinking about just that small little thing that we can do about, our reminders about. And for you, Chris, if I could pose the same question as you're thinking about some of your essential needs that you have, what are some of the most important needs that aren't being met? And how could the college help you meet these needs so you can better focus on your education?
Hey, Devin. Sure. So, when I returned to school, I made a commitment that I was going to prioritize my education, that school was going to be number one for me. I'm not going to put a job in front of it or anything else. Luckily my kids are grown and they're out and they're doing well. So I feel like my most important or my most essential need in regards to this is to get the education, the best education that I can, to really be able to learn and retain the knowledge, so that I can go into my career field and be effective and do new things. And so that's where I feel like the rubber hits the road for me, is because I work so much. I don't feel like I can become fully immersed in school. I mean, I've been getting really good grades, A's, and I think I got 2 B's, but I feel like I could do better if I were able to spend more time or dedicate more of my life to just becoming involved in my learning and retain the knowledge. Also, I know that I even spoke with Don Love at one point, and I told him, I don't feel like I'm getting A's, but I don't feel like I'm learning what I want to learn. I feel like I can learn more. And I think a lot of that has to do with, the financial stress, the burdens of having to pay bills and transportation costs, insurance, car insurance, things just come up all the time. Yesterday, I got a message from Microsoft, my subscription's up, they want $70, and then today I got a message from McAfee, my security, internet security, they want $70. It's just like those things that just keep coming and coming and coming. And so I feel like even if there were some type of like housing vouchers or rental assistance, or, I've gotten like gas cards and things like that, but things just for me, things to help with the financial burden so that I could focus more of my time on my learning and be the best student and learner that I possibly can.
Yeah, you bring up a great point, especially around the financial difficulties, like when it comes to, I think, program our grants being, sent to us is we need flexible spending for our students because unexpected financial concerns do come up. So thank you for posing that.
Thank you.
Don, I'm gonna flip it back to you.
Yeah, I just want to say that was a powerful statement. When Chris said that to me a couple of weeks ago, we were just talking about his semester, and it hit me really hard because it reminded me that as many times we think students they just want that grade. They want to actually learn this stuff. And we've got all of these barriers that they're navigating constantly. And to rob students of that ability to learn, that ability to truly digest the information and connect with their professors and their peers is really a sad situation in our situation. I think we're going to move on to the summary application. So thank you, Chris and Patricia. We're going to get to a Q&A portion, and then may have some additional questions for you. But let me go ahead and kind of wrap up my side of this. The summary of what you see in this report. Using a racial equity lens is critical to understanding and working with Black students. It's the way that we're going to be able to analyze and solve problems. Relationship building. I think we've heard that in every webinar and heard it quite a bit today. We heard it from our student voices. Building the relationship is priority. Creating authentic relationships. And intrusive counseling. I think that's also come up in last week, or the previous webinar number 2. Don't be shy about using intrusive practices. It's everybody's business, and that's how our students are going to succeed. We turn over to Devin to close out with the last 3 summaries.
I want to echo again that, thank you, for our student voices. You all have so much value in, affirming, what we, to be true. And that is, basic needs must be met first in order for you to be able to show up and be present, for school and for you to reach your academic and personal success. We know that, with a trauma-informed approach, that we have to uphold these pillars of safety, choice, collaboration, trust, and empowerment to maintain this relationship that we have with you all. And by doing so, we really want to make sure that we're shifting our lens as we're looking, at our students for, what has happened to you in your journey as you're considering them, navigating their academic environment and experience. So I think now we are going to move to our Q&A portion. So if you have not already, we want to hear from you with your questions in the chat. Salam, Adrian, do you have any questions for us?
Yes, I'll start with the first question. Hi, everybody. So it can be hard to determine when counselors are meeting with students to provide supports. Is it personal counseling, or when is it time to refer them to mental health services? And then the second part to this question is, what advice can you give to educational counselors? How to determine the difference?
Yeah, I agree. It is tough. And I know I find myself in that situation often. We're talking about, as Devin was going over Maslow's hierarchy, I look to see if there's a physiological need that maybe is most pressing, and I can direct students to resources to cover that, our food pantry, our farmers market, our care team. But if it's a safety issue, and that includes mental health, if I'm getting that sense, then that's the flag. That's for me. Now, the challenge, especially working with Black students, is how do you get them there? Because I know for years I had a hard time getting students, especially our Black males, to consider going to our health services department to meet with a mental health counselor. I've found in the last few years, it's been a lot easier, I think, because folks are experiencing so much. The weight of everything that's going on around them in our country, in our city, on campus, in their daily lives is so much. We talked about making sure that I know my limitations. I'm not a therapist. And sometimes I get to that point where I definitely have been a great ear for students, but there's a point where I just have to let them know this is not my area of expertise, but we've got some folks that I would love for you to sit down with, and they will be able to give you a little more direction that I can't right now. So what advice will I give other counselors? Prioritize the student needs first. And I think that even goes back to what we're talking about, the need to do an education plan. Or, I've had meetings that started off one way and then they just completely went down a path where all I'm doing is hearing what this student is experiencing right now and looking at what resources I can connect them to. Devin, do you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, I think you took the words right out of my mouth, but I think what it comes down to is, again, establishing that role and that boundary up front about what your role is and what your scope of competence is. Like, Don was saying, is that, I'm not a therapist. And so when I think as you begin to see that the session's beginning to go that way, you can kindly redirect the student by letting them know that there is a space, on campus that provides, that further support. And you can do so by still validating their feelings and listening to them, but by letting them know that, like, this is really out of my, area that I feel like competent in how to fully address.
Okay, I have a question. Are there basic need resources for students that are mandated for institutions to have?
So I don't know that there's a mandate, but I know that there's a big push that colleges across the nation begin building in basic need programming or a basic needs center on their campus to have these supports available. And so I think these are all starting off at different levels. Some have a robust pantry and basic needs services. Some don't have anything at all. So I hope that answers the question. I don't know that there is a mandate, but I know that I think there's a lot of support behind having institutions have this programming in place.
Are you noticing, this question is to both of you, are you guys noticing that Black students are being disproportionately impacted by COVID versus our other student populations?
Yeah, I think Devin pointed that out. The data supports that. And certainly me working with Black students on a daily basis, the fact that I take more, I'm taking more calls, I get more text messages, I'm getting more emails, students, I've talked about the importance of us reaching out first. And so I try to do that, but I've got students who are reaching out and definitely students who maybe I usually only connect with when I'm reaching out to them. And I'm finding them reaching out to me as well. So yeah, I think that goes without saying.
Yeah, and I think like Don said, like the data that we pull from our pre-registration survey only validated that, like, when the pandemic hit, that it exacerbated what we were already seeing with our students in the divide and the gap in their educational learning, and that Black students didn't have access to laptops and to stable internet to successfully transition to this online learning, and that our students that were already struggling with their rent and housing, were put in a more dire situation with the increased loss of employment and opportunities and things like that. So yes, I would say our Black students are impacted even more now.
This question is for the students, both Chris and Patricia. Can you share some of the classes you felt most connected with, and in what subject and why?
For me, as last semester, the class that I most connected with was a feminist film theory class. It was a phenomenal class. It had an online Zoom component, and everybody showed up every week. It gave us an opportunity to discuss some of the things that are going on in the world today in a safe space. My instructor always checked in with us at the start of class, asked us how were we doing, not how were we doing as a student, but how are we doing? And she helped to create it's like a little mini community. We used to get together on Zoom and watch movies, we called it Foreign Film Fridays also. So, and I learned a lot about feminism as one of the subjects that I wanted to learn about. And I was able to do that and fulfill one of my requirements to transfer at the same time.
Yes, for me, I think a few different classes that I've definitely my horticulture classes, because that's my focus, and that's part of my major, and they're just fun, and so it was easy to get involved. And I had a couple really great teachers over there. But I would also like to mention like two of the other classes. I think it was a couple years ago, an English 101 class I really liked, because the teacher brought up dynamic issues. She wasn't scared to talk about racial issues, gender issues, things like that. And we would have these really cool discussions in class. There were actually like 5 students. I think they were all white male students that just dropped a class at one point because they didn't like hearing about the things. But I really liked it because it was a place where I could voice my opinions and hear other people's hear other people's views. And then my sociology statistics class, because of my professor, Michael Arce. Shout out to Professor Arce. He was just awesome. It was last spring. It was, COVID happened right in the middle of class. And the way that he just transitioned and made himself available to students to help with the class, he just made it really fun and interesting. And so those classes.
Thank you. My next question has to do with the resources that you mentioned, that what you guys are doing at the MiraCosta. And so someone asked, how are you handling your emergency fund distribution? Is it going through your financial aid department or a third party agency?
Yeah, so it's a two-pronged approach. So because our emergency grants are coming from various fundings, including CARES Act or private donations, things like that, what we do is we funnel all emergency grant requests through our emergency request form. And then from we have a team of folks working behind the scenes to identify out of those students that are still currently enrolled who are Title IV eligible, so our financial aid students, and then who are not. And so if our students do receive financial aid and are signed up to receive their reimbursements through Bank Mobile, which is a direct deposit, they'll receive funds that way. And so then our financial aid team will kind of administer those funds, and then the other students will receive a check. And so that's working closely with our accounting department. So it is like a multi-level system of people behind the scenes of making this whole system work. But we like to have all requests kind of funneled through the CARE program.
I think we're going to wrap it up with one more question. And this question is for the students again. So Patricia and Chris, what are things instructional faculty do that help you feel safe in your learning environment?
You want to go first, Chris? Go ahead.
Sure. Instructional faculty, that would be counselors.
It could be counselors or like teachers in the classroom. I think they were mainly focusing on the classroom.
Yeah, I don't, I've never felt unsafe in my learning environment, even in the horticulture department. I've taken probably 8 classes over there, and I've been the only African-American student in every single one of those classes. But I think I just don't have that mentality that I'm unsafe anywhere, anywhere in the city. But I mean, Don and Larry, my EOPS counselor, they just give me encouragement. They show me resources. They give me encouragement. They let me know that I can expand myself. Coming out of prison, being formerly incarcerated, and coming to school, there were a lot of things like, I even tripped off the fact that they would give me their phone number, right? Because like I'm in prison, like no correctional officer is going to give you his phone number. So, and the fact that they gave me their phone number, I was like, am I supposed to have this? Like, there's a distinction between you, like you're an authoritative figure and I'm a student, and it went back to the thought of like, you're a correctional officer, I'm a prisoner. And so just things like that kind of like helped me acclimate to being a free person in society and being valued and being of worth. And so I think just the relationship and the close connection that I've built with them, and that they reached out and built with me, has let me know that I can do anything I want to on campus and off campus,
For me, I think I agree with Chris. I haven't felt unsafe, but I have felt not very bright sometimes. And my professors always make themselves available for office hours. And it's the office hours that pretty much fit our individual schedules. So they may have like a set time, but they say, if you can't meet me at that time, Patricia, if I have something going on with my daughter's homeschooling, then what time can you meet? And I think that has been really instrumental in helping me to feel comfortable in class and to gain some confidence. That's another big thing that they do, is they help me build that confidence that, that I can make this transition after all of these years and be successful where I wasn't successful, the first time around. And always checking in with us. I think I haven't had not one professor that doesn't do like a check-in. And that could be partway through the semester, do an anonymous survey, asking us, do we have what we need? And yeah, I think though that making themselves available during office hours is really important, and it makes a connection with that professor.
Well, thank you, Patricia and Chris, for sharing. Thank you, our audience, for the questions. I think I'm going to kick it over to Dr. Stewart to close us out here.
So again, thank you to Devin, to Dawn, and to Patricia and Chris. We appreciate your honesty and vulnerability in answering the questions, and we celebrate your resiliency. I'm going to borrow from one of the comments in the chat that you are inspirational. So your stories are inspiring to hear, and we appreciate your presence in this space. As promised, we want to close it out with providing some questions for you to think about in terms of self-reflection, taking back to your campuses and engaging in dialogue and continuing the conversation with colleagues. So a few questions to take into account, and we will be sending these out to participants in addition to a recording of this webinar. How do you and colleagues hold space and meet students where they are in your counseling office? What does this look like? What would you need to change in your counseling practice to prioritize basic needs in an appointment or student interaction? Are counselors and counseling staff aware of disaggregated data around basic needs, homelessness, housing insecurity, food insecurity, transportation? Do you know what your campus data says about Black students and how they are being impacted by COVID? And what types of trainings are available for counselors to ensure they are equipped to address basic needs? So we thank you again for being in this space. We have a few more pieces of information that we want to share with you. Again, this was the third part of a 4-part webinar series. The next webinar series will take place next Friday, and that will be focused on maintaining an equity focus in the face of oppressive structures. So myself, as well as one of my administrative colleagues, Nicole Jones, who is also a Dean of Counseling at Cuyamaca College, we're gonna dive in and address how do you take all of the pieces that you've learned in the past webinars, how do you apply that when we know that there are structures in place at our campuses that sometimes can impede equity. So we'll be discussing that. We hope that you can join us next Friday. We also will be recording that webinar and sending that link out to folks. And I'm going to hand it to Luis, who's going to talk a little bit about the Counselor Network.
Yes, thank you. And again, just big thank you and such great work that Don and Devin, you know, I mentioned at the beginning that you were going to be really in for a great treat with the wonderful material and information that these scholars and practitioners were sharing. But equally, the students themselves have instructed us, have educated us, and I hope you heard that loud and clear. I'm going to go back and listen to them again. Right now, we wanted to just quickly ask if you would like to join the Counseling Network. There'll be information in the chat so that you could join. We also have a roundtable series that we're halfway through, I think, or at the tail end. There's a session next week. But we would love for you to join the community as well of counselors working across the state. These are both high school community college counselors working together to try to support students across the board. The last thing I'll share is that, you know, I started talking about the role that counselors have in ensuring learning, right? Pillar 4 of Guided Pathways. But really, you know, this session really pointed out to me that it's more than just ensuring learning, it's ensuring success. These students, especially Chris, when you said that you want to go beyond the grade, you feel like you can learn more. So it's the structures that we have in place for the learning are important, yes, but the structures, the support, the way counselors and other student support services personnel and professionals play add so much to the ability for students to go further and reach their dreams. So I just want to thank everyone for such a great session. Please check us out online, and we thank you so much for joining us today. Have a great rest of the day and weekend. Be safe, everyone. Take care.